We're going to talk about Eric's book, and we are lucky enough to have Dr. Castleman and Fernanda Giannassi, and we are going to introduce the nature of the book and why it's important and the work behind it. Introduce yourself, would you please?
My name is Barry Castleman. I'm a public health worker. I've been dealing with people on the ground over 25 countries trying to do something about the asbestos threat to the world and promote asbestos bans. Between 2000 and 2010, we held a lot of gatherings of activists who were trying to organize and share information to promote asbestos bans in different countries. And someone who started to show up at these was Eric Jonckheere. And so Eric was a pilot, and he told the story of what had happened to his family with asbestos. He had grown up in his father and grandfather had worked as engineers for the big Belgian Eternit company that had a plant making asbestos cement sheets and pipes. Eric grew up right at the factory periphery where there was a home provided for his family, a country home. So his father, who was an engineer, could be available if there were any breakdowns or other things that needed to be attended to at the factory. And Eric, as it turned out, what happened was Eric's father and mother died of mesothelioma. And then there were 5 boys in the family, and 2 of his brothers died of mesothelioma in their 40s. And only the father had worked for Eternit. And so it's a really tragic story. He tells about the history of the plant, about the boys playing around the places where the asbestos was loaded and unloaded, and the products were loaded and unloaded, and the dump sites, because all these asbestos cement sheet and pipe plants in the world, in the ordinary course of manufacture, has a certain amount of breakage of the sheets and pipes of asbestos cement, which cannot be recycled. So they have to get rid of that stuff. And what they did, they had a big, crushing units. They would then distribute this stuff all over the region. So in any case, there was this widespread environmental pollution and the devastation of Eric's family. And now, 2 years ago, Eric himself was diagnosed with the octopus, as his mother referred to mesothelioma, the family curse.
So what you're going to see in the next 15 minutes is Eric was unable to join this conference because of his diagnosis. He is loved and respected. He came to our first conference, and I believe that Dr. Frank and Lemon will remember, as you do, Eric came to Detroit. He flew in, he found that there was an asbestos conference happening, and he was so excited to hook up and meet people that were working on education and awareness. So Eric has a long history with ADAO. He's spoken many times. For those that want to know more about Eric, we have many videos. We'll build a page. But this session is all about his book, and it was meant to screen during yesterday's Asbestos Art, Advocacy, and Action Festival, because Eric really is a pillar of action. Fernanda, can you briefly connect the factories in Belgium with what the problems you have, please? Identify yourself too. Please.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Okay, the history of Eric's family is terrible and very touching. Firstly, I met his brother Javier in Brussels, and he was just setting up the Belgian asbestos exposed people like we have in Brazil, and we exchanged our sadness, our experience, our suffering to live with people that develop asbestos-related diseases. Eric stayed with us in DC, in Washington, I think twice, yes? Mm-hmm. And he's a spectacular guy, very committed and very cold because he can speak several languages but I don't have this skill, sorry. And we continued talking and exchanging our experiences. The Belgian Eternit, we have to understand that the Eternit was a group, a multinational for us, two families. The Belgian branch was Eric's family lived in this backyard. They lived in the Eternit's backyard. They were children and lived in the middle of the waste, joking, playing with asbestos because they didn't know anything. His father was an engineer, but asbestos was a taboo. Can I say taboo? Yes?
Sure.
Nobody spoke about the risks, the damages. Okay, they learned with their suffering. And there's another branch, the Swiss branch, that dominated some plants in South America, especially in Brazil. And in Osasco, the city where I stayed working at the labor ministry for 5 years. And Stefan Schimheim, the Swiss billionaire, to escape from the military service in Switzerland. When he was 18 years old, he went to Brazil to work at the plant in Osasco. This guy that Barry is working and Vic very hard to remove their title. He received from the Yale University here in US as a doctor in humanities, yeah? And this guy, indeed, he stayed in Brazil 6 months. And his biography, he says that the dust was so huge that he couldn't see the other workers. And he says, I worked there, and in Osasco, I decided to stop producing with asbestos. It's a hypocrisy, because he never worked. I interviewed the workers in the same period, and they said, okay, he came to the beach to visit our institute, the Snakes Institute, everything, tourism. Never worked there. But he says this in his biography. And to finish the history about Schimheim, he, firstly, the Rio 92, the UNCED, United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, 2 years before, he was indicated to be the chief, the head of the sustainable speech development, representing all the entrepreneurs, okay? And he sold his interests of Eternit asbestos cement factors for the other company that he is part in as well, Saint-Gobain, the French Saint-Gobain.
So shall we roll the movie, the video that we have? Are you ready?
Okay, let's see.
Good morning. Welcome to our Friday Arts, Advocacy, and Action Day of learning about how ADAO integrates art with advocacy and, of course, action. We want to take time out to really profile an author and an activist who's done amazing work. And I'd like to introduce 2 special colleagues this morning. Dr. Castleman, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Barry Castleman. I'm a public health worker. I've worked with people around the world over the last 50 years on the problem of asbestos in health.
And Vicky, please introduce yourself.
I'm a translator and interpreter, and I live in Italy, sometimes in Wales, but mostly in Italy. And I've been involved for the past 11 years in translating also asbestos victims, trials, books, and trying to put people in touch with each other, even though they didn't speak the same language.
and your translating has helped me, helped ADAO, and I know groups around the world, Vicki. So thank you for your dedication to bridging the gap of language. I'd like to focus on Eric's book. And Barry, I know you have worked very closely with Eric on his book, and Vicki, you translated, so we'll share some of the comments there. But every victim has a story to tell. And they're not easy stories. They dredge up pain and sorrow and anger. I know as a mesothelioma widow, I have felt that. From the moment I met Eric in Detroit, and Barry, you might remember when Eric flew into Detroit, I think it was our second conference, he wanted to come in and find a community. He shared bits and pieces of his story. When I heard that 4 of his family members, his parents and 2 brothers, had died from mesothelioma, it was a shocking story. It's not uncommon that it goes through waves of families in communities, whether it's through occupational exposure, environmental, take home. But let's focus on Eric's book and story, because today we really want folks to know that, one, there's an amazing author out there, Eric Jonckheere. He's written a book you can all buy. Barry and I will make sure that that link is available. But let's talk about Eric's story in written form, Barry, the book. Tell us a little bit about what you know about Eric's story. Why does this book matter now?
Well, Eric has come to a number of international conferences to help raise public awareness and support our work to get asbestos banned in all these countries. And you know, while the defenders of the asbestos industry would retreat into obscure kinds of statistical arguments, no one could look at what had happened to Eric and his family and say that asbestos should still be continue to be used. And it was just a powerful testimony. And Eric, being a pilot, would fly into these meetings all over the world and contribute what he could to raise awareness about the importance of stopping the use of asbestos. He writes in the book about landing in India and seeing all the asbestos roofs as his plane was coming in, about how the company, the big Eternit company that had the plant that caused the devastation to his family, where his father and his grandfather worked, where his uncle worked, and where so many of his family members were exposed by the totally careless use of asbestos, coming in on barges and playing on the dumps the way that children do. And so he describes these things, and also the disinformation campaigns of the Eternit company and its doctors, one of whom died from mesothelioma. But before then, he was reassuring Eric's father that the cough that he had was nothing to worry about. It turned out to be mesothelioma. Eric's family consists of 5 boys. As I say, the father and the mother and 2 of his brothers have died of mesothelioma. And the octopus, as Eric's mother referred to it, came for Eric in 2000. And so he is now struggling with that at this time. And so he's been a powerful testimony in coming to these global conferences and talking about his family when we're trying to shut down this criminal industry.
Thank you, Barry. And later on during the segment where we're featuring Eric's book, we are going to show a couple of clips of videos where Eric has spoken at our conferences. He also was involved with Daniel Lambo's movie Breathless, which is very powerful, showing the criminality of the asbestos industry from Belgium to India and beyond. And also a clip that Eric asked us to show. So there is more. Vicki, as an expert translator, you have over almost a decade of experience. You've heard our personal stories. You actually helped me to translate and communicate with Giuseppe, an older gentleman who lost his wife to mesothelioma. We couldn't speak the same language, but our eyes could communicate. And thanks to you, we were able to talk with each other. So what you do truly matters. When you look at Italy and you hear the stories from Casale and elsewhere, you also know what's happening in the United States. We haven't banned asbestos. We continue to import hundreds of tons and use it. What do you see the importance of Eric's book to be from Italy to Belgium? How does Eric's book help?
Well, first of all, it's the same company. It was Eternit, and it's Eternit there and Eternit here. But I think the other thing is the betrayal. Because in both cases, both in Casale and in Belgium, where 3 of his brothers died, I mean, it's they believed in these companies. These companies were not only supplying work, but they were basically acting as company towns in both cases. And I don't think that's by chance. In both cases, they shaped these towns, they shaped the cities. They became more than just a company. And so, for example, if you read about Eric's mother, who was the wife of the technical manager of the plant and therefore lived right next to it, she felt totally betrayed. And that is why she reacted to it, because that was the company where the family had worked for generations, but also the company that looked after the whole, so to speak, looked after the whole town and their children and everything. So I think that one of the features that links the Belgian to the Italian story, Italian meaning Casale in particular, Casale Monferrato, whereas, you know, about 10% of the population died of mesothelioma, has already died, is the great betrayal, the paternalistic and all-encompassing company that then turns out to be a devil in disguise. And a lot of people that I've met in Casale, that you've met in Casale, that's their story. How could they have done this to us?
And betrayal is a key word, which leads to anger, obviously, for most of us as asbestos victims. And I know for anyone watching this segment will probably connect to Eric's betrayal and anger. Vicki, as a translator and being so close to Casale and also translating Eric's really strong book about his war with Devil's Dust, did you find that most of the workers and families in Casale just weren't informed that asbestos was a carcinogen and there was no safe level?
They had not been informed. And they, in fact, had been reassured that they should not worry. The city is now full of asbestos because, as well as the workers, they gave or sold asbestos sacks for people to use in their courtyards or to insulate their attics and that. So now I remember one of the people of Casale saying, every time one of us has got a cough, you know, you never think of bronchitis, you never think of a cold, you just think, is it my turn? And then when it is, on the other hand, you think, maybe I won't be so unlucky, maybe it'll be different for me. And so you have to betray yourself and tell yourself a story. So it's very difficult, very, very difficult. I'm amazed very often of the strength that that the victims have. And I remember, for instance, a person who has since deceased, but who was the vice president of AFIVA. And I said to him, he was quite ill at the time, and I said to him, I won't come too near because I've got flu. And he said, oh, I've got mesothelioma. Who cares about your flu? And I've found this ability to be witty in a situation like that to be extraordinary. And so I have great admiration for the victims and people who, who fight.
Well,
Let me say the environmental exposures in Casale are not that different from the exposures around asbestos cement pipe and sheet plants all over the world. There's a certain amount of breakage that's part of the industrial process. And when you have these broken sheets, they're not recyclable. And so, as in Casale, they're either dumped or they're ground up into some kind of pulverizing unit. And then the waste material can be used for surfacing roads and farm roads and driveways. And that's what happened in Casale, so that the deadly asbestos was distributed to the environment in a totally irretrievable and permanent way, threatening the community to this day.
There's one more thing I'd like to add. One might even say that people didn't have the knowledge at one time. In Italian, there's a saying, errare umano perseverare diabolico. It is human to make a mistake. It is like the devil to persevere. And when the factory in Casale closed, because they knew it was deadly, and it went through bankruptcy and everything, they just turned the key. They left the sacks there for the wind to take the dust and for the dust to rest all over the town. I found that inexcusable to the power of, I don't know, to the nth power, because it was really a sign that not only did they know, but they really didn't care much about human life.
Yeah, that's a great point. What we have in the United States is it is easier, it is cheaper to do it wrong than to do it right. Like they would prefer just to walk out of a factory and not clean it up and leave a toxic dump than to pay for proper abatement and disposal. So we have a lot of that going on in the US. I think we're getting back to Barry's book, though. It is courageous for a victim to write their story because it is painful. And Vicki, you're very kind about the courage that victims show. And I think our anger and our solidarity gives us the strength. And I think when people read Eric's book, they will see that not only he's an amazing writer, but his story is so powerful. But Eric is one of many. Thank goodness he's written his story. But Eric isn't the only family that's been touched. And I hope people will read his story and then look at how they can help Eric in Belgium, ADAO in the US, and others around the world. Our solidarity is truly our greatest asset. We will make certain that we have Eric's book a link so you can purchase it, and we will queue up the different videos he's done. And in the meantime, we're sorry that our dear friend can't join us today. We hope he can join us next year. And Eric, from the bottom of my heart, I love and respect you. You're here today in spirit with us, and we look forward to tipping a beer with you in 2023. Dr. Castleman and Vicki, thank you so much for raising the awareness of Eric's book. And Vicki, you translated, and Barry, I know you worked so hard on this book too. So the book means a lot to me, and I know to other readers. It's a powerful book. Thank you for making it possible.
Thank you.
Welcome to Brussels, capital of Belgium. My name is Eric Jonckheere, chairman of ABEVA, the Belgium Association of Asbestos Victims. Asbestos has been used in over 3,000 different applications. Let me take you 35 kilometers north of Brussels to Capelle-om-den-Bos, the small village where I was born. There, the multinational company Eternit produced asbestos cement for over 100 years, the most widely distributed product made with asbestos worldwide. But what was the human cost of this mass production?
Nous avons une grande chance, au fond, dans l'industrie que nous avons, c'est que l'amiante et le ciment, ça constitue ce que j'aimerais appeler un mariage parfait.
Asbestos cement products have been used since the early 20th century. It is considered a miracle product in the world of construction and insulation. It's easy to produce for a small cost and thus very profitable for the industry. This factory of the company Eternit was run by the Emsons family, one of the richest families in Belgium. The factory provides a lot of employment in the villages of Kappel op den Bos and Tisselt.
2,600 people worked in the two factories in Capelle. Our fathers, who were engineers, raised families in the village. We were 28 young people playing the street. 7 houses were demolished to my right, which were inhabited by families or workers. Everyone had a job here. Everyone was so proud to be part of Eternit's payroll. We grew up in the countryside. There was plenty of work in the factory, so we thought Capelle was really a paradise on earth. What could go wrong?
But all that had a cost. Breathing asbestos dust can cause 3 diseases: asbestosis, lung cancer, or mesothelioma. An aggressive lung cancer that can develop 40 years after exposure. In most cases, mesothelioma is fatal. The dangers of asbestos were already established at the beginning of the 20th century. The industry and the asbestos lobby first concealed and then minimized the danger. It takes 100 years before asbestos is banned in Europe. But the damage was already done. Living close to the factory was enough to become infected.
My father, Pierre Jonckheere, has worked all his career in the two factories in Capelle. He was never ill, but developed a severe mesothelioma. He died in our house when he was 59 years old. Our mom moved and took her family with her. She contracted mesothelioma in 1999 and died in 2000, age 66, a non-occupational victim. Then Pierre-Paul, my brother, he started coughing, contracted mesothelioma, and died, age 43. Then there was Stéphane, my second brother, who also got mesothelioma, also a non-occupational victim. He passed away in 2009, age 44. À l'âge de 44 ans.
Belgium had the largest asbestos cement factories in the world. The current official figures speak of 300 annual victims in Belgium as a result of exposure to asbestos. But these numbers are underestimated. Probably more than 800 people lose their lives every year. First the workers in the factory, and then the residents in the area, but then others in the offices and buildings where asbestos was present. And it is still present. Until the last lawsuit in 2012, Eternit proclaimed that those who legally attacked them were isolated cases. China, Russia, Kazakhstan and Brazil still operate asbestos mines. Asbestos still kills about 300,000 people around the world every year.
Nous avons une grande chance, au fond, dans l'industrie que nous avons, c'est que l'amiante et le ciment, ça constitue ce que j'aimerais appeler un mariage parfait.
Mr. Van der Est, you lied to us. Know that this perfect marriage between asbestos and cement has impacted 7 families in this street. 3 couples were torn apart by the mixture you described as miraculous. Pierre and Françoise Jonckheere, my parents, had a perfect marriage.